Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Lumber Word. The Lumber Word podcast is dedicated to engaging conversations about the lumber industry, including trading ideas, market trends, and evaluations of overvalued and undervalued assets. Welcome to The Lumber Word. We wish to emphasize industry that the veterans Matt Beamer, Greg Riley, and Ashley Buckle dissect the world of commodity lumber each week. We bring you up-to-date insights on supply, demand, and market trends. We encourage our listeners to make their own financial decisions, everyone taking into account their unique circumstances. Join us for informative and entertaining discussions and to seek professional financial advice about all things lumber.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode being recorded on February 7th, 2024 of The Lumber Word. We have Matt Beamer from Hampton Lumber Sales, Greg Riley, Sitka USA. I'm Ashley Buckle from Sitka, and riding along with us today, and will be joining us periodically over this year, since we were just laughing about how we know nothing about Southern Pine, Charles DeLaTorre from Industrial Forest Products. We had one of the people that Charles works with. I never want to say boss Charles.
No, because don't say that. We all fight in the trenches together.
There we go. Casey was on a couple weeks ago. Great feedback. So, Charles, you and I have done some stuff in the past on shows before. We trade together also. So why don't you explain a little bit about what your company does, who you are, where you're at, and then we'll move on.
We are real active in the Southern Yellow Pine market, as well as panels, primarily OSB. Real active in the multifamily business and low-grade industrial. And we've got 2 reman facilities in South Carolina, and we reload Southern Yellow Pine all over the Southeast, as well as some getting into some other species. So it works out really well. We've also got some shed trim production and a Euro premium no-lane product. So a little bit of diversification there, but overall we've got the asset-based side as far as manufacturing, but also a lot of mill direct business as well.
Sounds great. I guess I also hear you and Greg talking on the phone a lot together, trading back and forth. I have to tell you that's sometimes one of the highlights of my day, listening to you guys, especially if Greg has it on speakerphone. It's a real treat.
You better have your muck boots ready, Ash. That's all I got to say.
I've got the gun boots on, man. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go duck hunting up to my waist when you guys are talking.
No doubt.
So let's jump real quick into an intro on the market from last week. I think everybody has been sitting here expecting things to move a little bit higher, if I could say that. Some things disappointed in the last week, some things didn't disappoint. But it seems the theme is nobody wants to build an extra inventory at the end use level, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future in this podcast. But there were some featured items. Everything seems to be, Greg and I were talking before the show. He goes, you mean, Ash, everything supply and demand seems to be in check? I'm like, yeah, maybe that's the term I'm looking for. So I guess I'll kind of tack over to Matt, like the Pacific Northwest, Western Spruce, Texas. And we talked last week. Greg and I were busy last week. You were busy the week before. We were all taking our turn. What did you see this week so far?
I sent you and Greg an email on some stuff yesterday, and I said, I'm busy, but I'm not busy, if that makes any sense. I don't know if you remember me sending you that in our correspondence back and forth on some Euro stuff that we've got on with you. But, that kind of describes my week. Now, today I'm a lot busier than I was yesterday. I just got hit with a bunch of orders here in the last hour, trucks and cars. So it's just, I don't know. There's no real flow to it. There's no real rhyme or reason, but whatever happens at the end of the day, when I count up the number of cars and trucks I sold, it's surprisingly good. And so I don't know what that means. I'm not reading much into it. I do feel like weather's still a factor and time of year is still a factor, but I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm not like panicky busy, but I'm busy enough to pay my bills and not go to the poorhouse. So
are those orders that you're getting right now ones you expected, or are they coming out of right field?
Nothing is expected. I expected, the business that I wanted to sell earlier in the week, I wasn't getting any of that. And so like if I'd send an email out or talk to the traders on the floor going, here's what I want to sell, it just fell on deaf ears. And then I'd get orders on things I didn't want to sell, or I wasn't advertising that I wanted to sell. And those were surprises. And so today's the first day where I'm selling what I want to sell, and I'm selling what I want to sell at my prices. I'm not having to negotiate. I've got the fish are swimming towards the ship, right? And my bait's working. But for the rest of the week, it's been me making outbound phone calls and me responding to other people's inquiries on things I didn't even know that they wanted to buy. And so how do you read into that? I don't. It's February. And so, I'll take what I can get. I'm happy that I'm having some success this week, but I don't read much into it in the long-term big picture.
Thanks, Matt. It's perfect. Greg and I were talking yesterday. We're quoting a lot, and we're following up on trucks that people just did like last week that we said we're going to ship in 2 to 3 weeks. And there's a lot of business, like we said, we're quoting. And if you put a cheap enough number on it, you get the business. Or if it's a hard enough order, you get the business, right? But some of them, when you circle back at the end of the day, you're like, hey, thought you'd get a bunch of those trucks of X and you didn't get them, right? So Greg, what do you think on Euro, Eastern, multifamily? Take it however you want to.
I've been describing the market as sharply sideways. I mean, there's good liquidity. Mills, distribution are selling readily every day or every other day. To Matt's point, you have a day where you sell a lot of the things that you want to sell. You have a day where you sell, you get a bunch of orders that you weren't expecting. Mills are having the same thing. One day a mill is discounting something a little bit. The next day they're firm, but somebody else has something. Prices aren't really changing a lot. I did see a featured item had a little bit of an uptick in random lengths. Not that, I put a lot of credibility in anything that the publication does, and no disrespect to the people at RISI. The market is really well balanced right here. 2 features in Eastern spruce. Normally this time of year, there's a lot of production problems. It's really cold. The dryers aren't working. The Canadian National doesn't seem to be able to work properly. We have none of that this year. The distribution system is flowing very, very smoothly. There's no hiccups in it. So that's one of the things that I think is acting to keep the market kind of in balance. If we all of a sudden had some supply disruptions, I think that would impact the market. But it doesn't appear that we're going to have that. Mills consistently, everybody tells me that the mills are not making money. And I like to say is that everybody can lose money for a while, but nobody can lose money forever. So I'm not sure when we hit that tipping point.
You've never been to Vegas with me, have you?
No, but we should go. I want to go see.
You should go like right now. This would be the perfect time to go to Vegas. It's going to be a big weekend. I mean, what a great venue for the Super Bowl. But no, I want to go and see YouTube in the Sphere, which I hear is like absolutely amazing.
Wow. To quit multifamily.
Well, I got a question though. I got a question. Speaking on Euro and supply chains and disruptions and all that. I mean, if you look at all of your stock links, 8 through 16 in spruce, whether it's Euro, Eastern, Western. I mean, the biggest, I guess, highest price item has been 16 foot, right? So what is that from an experienced spruce trader? What does that tell you based on everything else? Considering the fact that most Euro mills primarily bring in 16s, 12s, 14s, and shorter are, I got 1 or 2, maybe 3 on a vessel.
One of the things, Charles, is that we've seen is 16s went from being really, really undervalued. They pulled back, and then they had a big move. If I look the last, 8, 10, 12 weeks, 16s haven't changed much in price. I could say that maybe they're actually a little weaker over that time period. $600 the port is a number that they're really happy with. What I've seen is they've shifted production from other items and shipping more 2x4 16s.
Okay, Charles, that's what Greg, that's what you kind of mentioned this morning when we were talking, and a bunch of people are calling me now saying, "Hey, do you have 16s that I can lock in with you in a month or two?" It's like, so everybody wants to always buy the overvalued, and everybody wants to ship the overvalued, right? So I think you were saying that what will probably happen is those vessels will probably have a lot of 16s on them coming in the future, right?
I'd rather own 12s.
Bingo. Me and you think alike.
Yeah, but-
Matty.
I mean,
but-
we're gonna have to cut
yeah, but
that one
they're-
out. We don't want everybody to know that.
Yeah, but they're, they're not going to there's no incentive to ship 12s in the 400s.
My point is, if the Europeans, which last week Thomas said point blank, there's just going to be less lumber coming over, and I believe him. I have no reason not to. Then what they do ship over will be heavier to the lengths that we want to buy. They can pick and choose what we want to buy, and they know what we want to buy. We want to buy $600 2x4 16s. The market's been telling them that since August. But I don't think that the price of 2x4 is really going to fluctuate all that much. I don't see a big mountain of 2x4 production coming from the Western mills, whether it's hemlock or spruce out of Canada or Alberta or any of the inland mills. They're not going to ramp up their 2x4. We're already maxed out on 2x4 We can't make any more. So those will still hold their value. But when things are overvalued or at a proper set value, you start looking for the undervalued stuff. I mean, 10s are too cheap right now. 12s are too cheap right now. 14s were too cheap 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Dude, I bought some 14s premium from a fancy pants mill in British Columbia for $460 delivered to Austin, Texas back in September, October timeframe. And they're worth $560 now. So that's the kind of stuff that I'd like to see more of. Like, hey, right now I think 10s and 12s are undervalued. Don't care about 16s. I'll be able to buy more 16s at 600. Right. But I won't be able to buy more 10s at 380 mil or 360 mil, more 12s at those prices. At some point, those will change.
To kind of piggyback on that, though, as far as 16 goes, I mean, what does that tell us about market consumption? Because if you look at multifamily, you asked Greg to talk about this.
Yeah, and I wanted you to talk about too.
But a lot of multifamily, they're not using a boatload of Euro. And a lot of that Euro 16 foot is going to distribution or your pro dealer yards, correct? At least in the Southeast. So what does that tell us about single family? Because that has been the biggest worry all year.
Hey, quick question though, Charles, what you just said, why don't people use Euro in multifamily?
There's a bit of a gray area.
Is it because they just don't
Doug
know?
Fir or spruce?
We're talking about spruce Euro.
I don't think it has the strength value.
Okay.
And there's been some issues in the past that kind of have not been addressed. So people just shy away from it. So, I mean, I guess I understand 12 and longer in Canadian, right?
Right now, they're not is the cheapest thing to deliver. Right?
Yeah.
So we'll talk about multifamily and, multifamily AFS, and to the cheapest southern yellow pine. It's spruce or southern yellow pine market area, that lowest cost item.
But yeah, I mean, my main question is single family for, I think, a lot of us was kind of a concern. And once again, that Euro 16 foot goes to distribution and pro dealer. And if they're consuming and they're getting that much of a premium or right size pricing as y'all are describing, what does that tell us about single family as a whole? If that consumption metric's there, is it stronger than we anticipated? Are people anticipating things due to rate drops coming? What is the driver of that?
I'll just be real quick. At the beginning of the year, going into 2024, the people that I sell to that are in that business, they all told me it'd be flat to up maybe 10% was kind of their expectation. Mainly flat was what they expected. I personally believe single family is going to be better than that. And the reason has nothing to do with anything other than two things. It's election year. I think the feds are going to do everything they can to grease the skids economically. That's going to entice builders to build. But I also think that with the mortgage rates sort of normalizing around 6%, people aren't shocked anymore by these huge jump from 2.75 to 8. Now it's just stabilized at 6, and we can live with 6. I think what causes uncertainty in terms of a builder deciding to go buy some property and throw some slabs on it is wild fluctuations in valuations and in interest rates and land costs and labor costs, right? Well, now that we kind of know where we're going to be for a while, and it looks positive that it'll stay here or maybe even drop a little bit, I think that gives these guys some incentive to do a little bit more than what they initially expected to when they were drawing the plans up in August or September last year. So I'm not like crazy bullish on single family, but I'm certainly not bearish on it. And I think it's going to surprise people. I feel the same thing about multifamily. I think a lot of the money problems that we're facing the multifamily guys last year and the year before are kind of going by the wayside. So there's my answer.
Greg, did you have a thought on that one too?
We're home builders first source stock, all-time highs. If existing homes being at a record low and new homes being the house historic, anything that's going to change that. So I look for new home starts and sales to close to where it's at, all things being equal. My card is multi-back in the fall with one of the economists that we keep trying to get him. He's very elusive. He's a very elusive guy to track him down. He was saying that.
So he was saying that multifamily is going to be about 20% of new home construction. Is that what I heard, Greg?
Yep. That's what you heard.
But it's okay. You're down. So multifamily was down 20% okay. Charles, so the one thing we started this off by saying we don't know anything about pine. I got all excited a few weeks ago and then looked at print and saw that it wasn't that exciting. And then somebody told me that one of the mills sold a bunch of 2x10 yesterday. What's going on with pine?
Your guess is as good as mine. But I think, I got some big shoes to fill because Casey kind of put on a real good speech. He's a little bit better of a public speaker than I am on the last episode. But pine as a whole, it's kind of reacting the way he described. It just happened. It took a little bit longer to happen. I mean, as of middle of the week last week, we've seen some people step in and make decisions, right? I mean, they're buying chunks and they're getting coverage just because there's value, right? And setting up those custom supply chain solutions that we can do that a lot of people can't is bringing a lot of people back into the market that, quite frankly, would wait till it goes to zero. Your select items you mentioned too before, 16 Southern Yellow Pine. I mean, those things have been cleaned up. I mean, rinse and repeat. And things are firming up. I mean, mills are up, even though print's not. But, I mean, we all know that this market we're in is operating more as a free market versus a data-driven market than it ever has before, right? Historical data, in this instance, where we're at today, your guess is as good as mine, right? All you got to do, and I think Matt mentioned this, is just participate. Some days you sell what you want, some days you don't. And sometimes you overprice things because you may or may not want the business and you end up getting it, right? There's a lot of variables that go into it, but the biggest thing for us is managing our order file and that supply chain.
Yeah.
But the market as a whole, it's got runway if things set up the way they need to.
Yeah, there's plenty of orders to quote unquote you can lunge at right now. The ones that you take, the ones that you take when you're driving home and you're like going, why did I do that?
Yes. Then they've done that.
Honestly, Ashley, along those lines, I was asked that type of question, and I said, look, I've seen here in the last week or two that patience is paying me, and so I don't feel like lunging at orders that are going to make me look back and regret. Like, why did I do that? Just because I was bored. I didn't sell enough that morning, and so I took something. In my career, that's usually a bad idea. I mean, it's not like this is August.
I've had a couple of those mornings over caffeinated where I came in and I'm like, I'm selling something today. And thank God I had somebody to walk me off the ledge on that one, or walk me back from the ledge, not off the ledge.
Did Greg tell you that you were being a bitch again?
He just said, hey, man, he's like,
and so that's a day. There's at least one opportunity per day to do that.
But generally I'll call myself out. I'll call myself out. Quick thing here I wanted to show you guys. So before the show, I just went through one of the big home, I won't say which one, home center, a couple of their items that they're selling. So like in Chicago, I'm pretty sure I did my math right. 2x4, 104 5/8, $640 $1,000, $3.84 a piece, right? I think I'm doing my math right. 384 divided by 6 board feet. 2x6, 104 5/8 prime stud, premium stud, $674 $1,000. Then I went down to Raleigh and I said, what are 2x4 16s trading at? Just a random store in Raleigh on their list. $9.82. So divided by 10.6667, that's $920 $1,000. 2x4 105s in Raleigh, $770 $1,000. So let's talk about price inelasticity or elasticity. If you're listening to the show and you're a builder or anybody else, this is one of those where you may want to shop some stuff if you're just going into your local home center and just paying it off the shelf and loading it in your country squire wagon, right? It's I was shocked when I saw some of the prices on some of these just lists. I'm sure there's deals and sales at other places, but I think some of these yards are getting so big and such less competition. There's not a lot of following the market down like what we see every day versus what the end user sees, right?
This is the time of year where it starts to perk up. Let's go into the marry, date, dump thing, and then that'll come up. We'll talk about that.
Real quick,
talk about that.
Inventory. How much inventory is at different parts of the node, from mills to end users? Where's the inventory sitting right now?
Mostly in the mill yard or the distribution facility. I mean, I don't think end users are going to spend any money on inventory when they can get a free flow of lumber when they need it.
Totally agree.
And a lot of
right
big
now.
retailers have VMIs and contracts. So why should they change what they've been doing for the last year and a half?
100%. Yep.
They're saving money, but they're not carrying massive interest bills, and they're letting us do it for them. So why would they change?
So, Charles, Greg, do you agree that's where kind of the inventory is being kept or not kept right now? And I guess my question is, if so that's, I guess the point is, what is going to be the hand of God event or something that happens to change all this? Or is it not going to change? I mean, obviously, if
unknown.
I was going to say everything that's transpired over the past 8 to 10 months and curtailments and people moving in and out and taking shifts off and all. I mean, these are all things that had to happen, right? And I'm speaking primarily from our background. But with all the new production that's been built in the Southeast, I mean, a lot of this stuff is driven by tax breaks, right? Whether it's municipal, state, whatever. And that production has to stay online for a certain amount of time. So as far as we're concerned, it's going to have to be a legacy guy that has just had enough. And I don't know, based on the heavy foreign investment in the Southeast and Southern Yellow Pine, I think them shutting down other assets and parlaying that production and trying to do a good job of species swap, right? That's going to be the tell of the tape and how successful they are at that. I mean, I don't think outside of that, unless we have some insane hurricanes and production just gets destroyed down here, stumpage gets astronomical and mills have to shut down. I mean, these guys made so much money. They spent money to upgrade these older mills. And a lot, some of them are still waiting on equipment. So that's the other thing. I don't know. You just got to play the game. You got to show up, swing the bat. That's it.
That's great.
There's two things that are going on in British Columbia that are going to be a problem going forward, and an immediate problem, not a long term. I mean, both immediate and long term. One is that the Canadian government, the NDP party, has gone to a new system of forest timber license management that involves consultation with all of the First Nation tribes. And so that's an article that I could forward you guys after this if you want to, that was on the Globe and Mail earlier in the week. And somebody sent it to me and I read that. And I talked to the president of Hampton. I talked to the people that run all of our production in British Columbia. And to me, it's a concern. And their response to me was exactly what I thought. It's going to slow down and put another layer of bureaucracy into place that's going to make it harder to get the logs from the forest to the sawmill for British Columbia and any areas in Alberta that involve First Nations codependency. So there's two things that have occurred in the last 5 years in terms of Canada in the West that are crimping production and making it more expensive to do business up there. Is the NDP party set aside big swaths of land due to caribou protection, right? That was their version of the spotted owl. No kidding. I'm not making this stuff up. Anyone can read about it. And now the next thing that they're doing, which nobody's talking about, but I'm aware of now, and I'm broadcasting it here with you, is that they're going into this quasi-private public partnership with the First Nations tribes on how to handle the future of the forest. And how is that going to affect, all of us producers? Well, I just think it's going to create a whole nother round of red tape for people. And what does red tape do? It slows things down and makes things more expensive. So, and I think it's by design. Honestly, I think the Canadian government has basically told the timber industry, we don't really support you anymore. And as opposed to in that period from 2004 to 2016, when they wanted to get rid of all those dead blue logs, and they're like, yes, we'll do anything you want us to do to support you. What do you need? And they worked with them. And now they've just completely done a 180. So that is going to make more production go away over the next several years in Canada, in Western Canada. Who knows what the Eastern guys are going to deal with, but that's what's happening out West.
Great points, Matt. A question for all you: who is buying $700 finger joint studs?
Not it.
People are buying
Not
them.
it.
There are people buying them, and they bought them this week.
And
So-
why? Do you trade any of those, Matt?
Yeah, I do. They're being traded to people that specified they wanted finger joints for contractual obligations, and they've got contractual obligations on the flip side, and that's exactly what they want. And those builders use only finger joints. So there are people that you just use finger joints because they just don't want to mess around with solid studs.
How does
There
that
are.
market trade? Is that a very liquid market, or is it just it's a pretty tight market?
It's just a niche. So it would be like how does 1x12 Idaho white pine trade? It trades to the people that buy it, and there's a few people that make it. There's only a handful of producers that make finger joints anymore. I mean, there's a couple of U.S. producers and there's a couple Canadian producers, both East and West, and that's it. And then there's 20 accounts in the United States that buy them on purpose, and that's it. It's a very niche market. It'd be like yellow pine 2x6 number 3 8-footers. Who buys those? Everybody makes them, but who buys them, right? You're not going to sell this to a retail yard.
I'm guessing the mills making finger joint studs, those parts of the mill are probably highly profitable at this point.
Charles, what's the discount for 2x6, 2x4 today? The spruce.
It's pretty large. I mean, it's an excess. I mean, if you just use print numbers, I mean, it's over $150 a thousand. Well over
150.
that.
Yeah, that's
So,
what I was gonna say. Exactly.
Yeah, it's and Ash and I were talking this morning. He asked me about it, and I was like, you either want them and like them and you pay for them, or you don't. I mean, it's just like when you go buy a new car, you choose what you want, no matter what the price is, I guess.
I mean, I've been watching the finger joint market for years, and it's something I've traded for 20 plus years. And like once or twice a year, usually once at least, it just does this. It just goes on a $150 tear and gets completely out of whack in terms of what the price really relative to solid studs should be. And then it'll come back to earth at some point. But it just does this, and it's basically due to the fact that there's a limited amount of production. It's not like we're going to build new finger joint mills, right? And the finger joint mills can't just double production next week because the price went up. It just doesn't work that way. They need raw material. They're taking a low grade or a fall down product, a 2x4 8-footer or 6-footer or something like that, and it needs to be priced right. If it's not priced right, then they won't make them. Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think that's also one of the reasons why the no grade stamp and the short studs are also hard to find right now, because any cheap fiber you can find is probably going into finger joints.
For sure.
Right? Which kind of lifts the tide of all the stuff around North America.
Are you ready to do the thing?
Let's go into our favorite segment. Marry, date, or break up. Charles, I think you know how this one goes. You pick an item you want to marry, talk about why you want to, one you want to date, and then one you want to break up with. You want to be careful the way you talk about it, because if your significant other or wife listens to this, you'll get a lot of questions later about what you meant by that. So
I might be a little biased in my answer, but I mean, also in yellow pine.
You want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I'll go first. I thought you wanted me to go first.
Go for it. You got it.
Mary, obviously, any southern yellow pine trim, everything's been undervalued for quite a while. A lot of production. Things are firming. People are stepping in the market and buying volume. One big thing that we're seeing too is locking in pricing on forward basis, and that's where those custom supply chain solutions come into play for us. So, I mean, anything on a commodity or a custom trim out of the southern yellow pine stick is something I'm extremely bullish on. Date, I would say 2x4 number 2 in southern yellow pine. There seems to be that kind of flushed out for a little while, but who's to say how long that lasts, right? because you're buying a 16-foot log. Your mill is going to want to maximize return on that tonnage. So who's to say that doesn't change pretty rapidly? The other thing that I would date is low grade Southern Yellow Pine. Low grade Southern Yellow Pine over the past 7 to 10 days has firmed up quite a bit, especially 14 foot. And that goes back to your 16-foot logs and not being able to upgrade on a trim back to a number 2. Dump, oh man, that's tough. I don't know. 2 to 6, 8 foot number 3.
Okay.
Because there's nowhere to go with it. I mean, Matt, you teed it up, man. I had to use it. But
we have like 300 units of those on the ground. You want to buy some from us?
No, sir, I'm good. But yeah, that 2 to 6, 8 foot number 3, that would be it.
Cool. I want to marry. I had a different one, but you made me change my mind. I want to marry 2x4 12 footers. You guys made me really change my mind on here. And I'm even looking at 10 footers. I got to find out who's hotter. And I'm going to have to run some charts and look at that. Date, I'm still on 2x4 16s. I love the volatility. Everybody, you have a great time out, and all of a sudden the price drops and everybody talks about how they're selling cheaper. And then none of those rumors are true. And all of a sudden it's back up to $580, $600, right? It's all over, but it's liquid. It's something you can move every day, right? And in general, Mary, I want to marry more European production. I think that's going to be really key as we lose more Western production, as we trade through this wormwood up in the Northeast, and as people are just looking for more, nice fiber. Break up. I wanted to break up with just number 3 in general until we sold a bunch of no grade stamp last week at numbers that I was scratching my head at a little bit. And number 3 seems to still be moving. And maybe that's just because Texas is sucking up a lot of that and other markets are sucking up a lot of that. But I don't really want to break up with anything right now. I think that's okay. We can make that rule up, right?
Yeah. It's your show, Ashley.
Took the words right out of my mouth, Beamer. Took the words right out of my mouth.
All right, Greg, you or me, buddy?
Go ahead, Matt.
I want to marry. There's a lot of things I want to marry, but I want to marry economy lumber, green or dry, doesn't matter. I just think economy, kiln wets, just your 1x4 mill run rough, just your lowest, crappiest forms of lumber that have suffered the most in 2023 because of the poor crating and box and pallet business. Like, I'll give you an example of why. We bought green Doug fir 2x6 economy in the $55 FOB mill range here.
Why?
Yeah, out west. And when you do the math on that, yeah, no kidding. I'm not going to lie about this. When you do the math on that, you can cut that stuff into 16-foot sections, palletize it, and sell it on Craigslist as firewood. Okay. There's some economy things that are going on in the West, dry and green. And I'm sure Charles knows about this in the South too, that are just too cheap, and they've been too cheap for a long time. And some of these items will probably double and triple in value as the year goes on, just on a slight increase in business in the industrial sector. And when I'm talking industrial, I'm not talking about the Texas number 3 business. I'm talking about the guys that make pallets and crates and barrels and reels and things like that. I think that lumber, that all of that economy, all that residual, really cheap lumber that's been available for the last year is going to either go away or it's going to go up in price, or both. And so I'm very bullish on the lowest of the low grades. I would want to date, I think, 2x4 hem fir and 2x4 yellow pine number 2, because those are the cheapest major number 2 random products on the planet right now. Sometimes
let me know what you want to buy. I can scratch all your itches, man.
I don't, but I just don't stock yellow pine. I'm not a yellow pine guy, but I noticed the value of it. And I just think it's undervalued compared to everything else. Then hem fir is undervalued compared to spruce. I have a massive amount of untapped inquiry for 2x4 number 2 spruce, random, just good random. At the price they want to pay is $50 below today's price. And the only thing that even come close to that would be yellow pine or hem fir. And they're still bickering over what the price should be. So I'm dating 2x4 number 2 of the off species. I don't want to own the thing I want to sell. Now we're going into the dump phase here. Is 2x4 U.S. West and inland dry dug fir. It's the most expensive plate stock that you can find on print and in America, and I'm not interested in buying that. Now I'm going to circle back around to the home center business, Ashley. One of the things that I wrote down on my Mary category that I didn't use, but I've talked about it previously, is 2x4 92 and 5/8, anything whitewood. I just think 92s are undervalued right now. And this is the time of year where you can buy good deals on 2x4 92s. And then sometime in March or April or May, you're going to look back and say, oh, I wish I'd have bought more of those,
Like
and
home center grade.
Even just stud grade, just
Stud grade.
2x4 92 and 5/8, period. I just think that it's the time of year where you should be investing in them and making some offers on them and be willing to inventory them. And if you look at the value of them compared to what we're paying and selling for random 2x4 plate stock. That being said, the final answer to your question about the home center business, we are right at the very beginning of when they start to just jack up their inventory levels. It happens in February every year. It'll continue until Memorial Day. And so what'll happen in March and April is that you're going to start seeing more inquiry for premium 92s, premium 96, premium 8-footers, premium 10-footers, just any premium short lumber, because the mills can't keep up with the flow of material that they had excesses of in January and part of February. Okay, well, we're a third of the way through February right now. We got 2/3, we got another week, maybe 10 days before the clickety clack click of all the busy feet moving around in the home center business is going to be visible and palpable in this company. And it's not just us, it's anyone that supplies those businesses on contracts. The lumber that you go and pick up, throw it in your, what'd you call it, a country squire?
Country squire. That's the car with the woody on the side.
I saw one of those the other day. Actually, it was pretty cool. The guy restored it. He even put like a little wooden handbag on top and strapped it in with
They're pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I think right now the home center business is just the very beginning of its normal annual tear that starts now.
That's perfect. And before I go over to Greg, I'll say that we do have a bunch of 96-inch barcoded premium studs that we're looking to sell trucks of. So little.
Do you have any in Texas?
If I had a bell, I'd ring it here. No, but Greg shipped a 2x3 8-footer all the way to Texas the other day. Good sale, Greg.
I just got an inquiry for a car 2x4 96-inch premium to San Antonio. If you want to help me,
I can figure out how to get it there. Okay. Greg, what's your thought here?
Couple thoughts before I go give you my futures. I'm looking at the March contract, other than a couple of days, is traded like in a $4 or $5 range for the last 2.5, 3 weeks. Basically sitting $10 to $15 premium to the cash market. Tight range. I'm looking for a breakout on that. Seasonals are positive for lumber. The underlying demand, we believe, is positive for lumber. The lower supply of European and Canadian spruce is a positive for lumber. But I'm almost saying is that the market's telling me that something's different, and maybe we need to drop before we can pop. I'm just throwing that out there. Things that make me go, huh? I'm going, huh? The other,
wasn't that also a song from the 90s? Things that make you go, huh?
I was too young.
Flashback.
Count me out on this argument.
Mary. Well, so hey, I can say anything I want. I have no worry of my wife ever listening to this. So absolutely, I start talking about lumber and she just goes blah blah blah. Love her, but she's not a big fan of the show. I'm out there. I'm standing on the plank on 2x4 9s. You got to be in to win. Great basis trade, undervalued relative to the market as a whole, like undervalued from an absolute cost basis. I think 2x4 9 should be $50 to $100 a thousand higher. I got a $5 uptick in random today. So I'm well on my way.
I hope you get that.
Yeah, but with that said, nines went down significantly below that print price, and if you talk about where they're off their low trade price,
they're not much. They're not much off their low trade, right? Actually, what I'm starting to see from an inquiry-based level is maybe I should be more married to 2x6 nines. That they went from a massive overvalue $250 premium down to the same price as 2x4 nines. They typically carry a premium, and I'm seeing an uptick in that inquiry level. So I should be married to those, and I should not divorce 2x4s, but maybe a trial separation.
Yeah, I like that.
Dating, it's like we just keep dating 2x4 16s, and we're going to keep dating them. I will say that I bought a bunch in the East and was pleasantly surprised that I got MSR. So that was a really nice little happy ending for me, if I might say.
You can say that on here, and everybody can read into that whatever they want.
I'm gonna follow up on Thomas from last week. I'm dumping. I'm breaking up with, and I'm flushing old weathered lumber. That's something you should always be breaking up with. Really, what you want to do is not have to break up with it, but it just happens.
It was a great show. Charles, thank you for coming on. We'll see you in a couple weeks again. We'll get a schedule out. Matt, thank you for being on. Greg, appreciate it. We'll circle back next week. But thanks everybody for listening to the Lumber Word. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Lumber Word. The Lumber Word podcast is dedicated to engaging conversations about the lumber industry, including trading ideas, market trends, and evaluations of overvalued and undervalued assets. We wish to emphasize that the discussions and opinions expressed in this podcast are purely for informational and entertainment purposes. They should not be considered as financial or investment advice. We encourage our listeners to make their own financial decisions, taking into account their unique circumstances and financial goals, and to seek professional financial advice if necessary.